Aanstoot has a lot in common with the people at Greenpeace. The 18-year-old was a dedicated participant in the Friday School Strikes for Climate Action, organized by Greta Thunberg. But now the Swedish climate activist is taking the pioneering environmental group on, telling Greenpeace in no uncertain terms it should stop opposing nuclear power. She's one of several young people behind a campaign called Dear Greenpeace. She recently posted a video message directed at the organization. Here's part of what she had to say.
We need to fight fossil fuels with all the methods at our disposal. All I want is a planet to live on. I should be fighting against the fossil fuel lobby, and I do not want to have to be fighting against my fellow environmentalists at the same time. So Greenpeace, get into the 21st century, stop fighting nuclear power, and take the fight where it belongs, against fossil fuels.
We reached Aanstoot in Linköping, Sweden.
Yeah, I just watched the video message to Greenpeace that you put together. It starts out with Dear Greenpeace, very polite, but those polite words disappear pretty quickly. Why?
Because it's a message of desperation from my generation to theirs. Yes, it's a polite urging for them to join us, but it's also a call of desperation that we are really, really desperate to have them in the struggle against fossil fuels, and it feels like a betrayal for them to be going up against nuclear power. But at the same time, I do really believe they have the ability to rethink this decision.
Why are you challenging Greenpeace on this issue now?
I'm challenging Greenpeace on this issue right now because they have recently sued the EU for the inclusion of nuclear power in the EU taxonomy. The EU taxonomy is what governs where the green financing within the EU and with EU money outside of the EU goes to. So it's very important for investments, generally speaking. And they want to get nuclear removed from it. And to do so would be a disaster for the ability to sustainably transition the EU.
Greenpeace says that the fact that the EU includes nuclear power in what it views and funds as sustainable is, quote, greenwashing, and it objects to the nuclear industry receiving money that it says should instead go to renewables. That they say that's a better use of that money. Those concerns about nuclear power don't meet the bar for you. Why is that?
Because we need all the clean energy we have at our disposal to make this transition, and it should be up to the individual countries to make that decision. The EU should not force France or Sweden to get rid of their existing nuclear fleets to fund renewables. And in the same way, the EU should be making a serious push on telling Germany, who has been getting rid of their nuclear fleet, that that was a bad choice for the environment, because in doing so, they had to burn even more coal. And so the EU's decisions on what is green should be based on science and being carbon neutral, and it should not be technology biased.
Greenpeace, as you know, also points out, though, and others do, that these plants created radioactive waste that will then remain dangerous for centuries to come. Do you feel any discomfort advocating for this, for the use of nuclear power, knowing that as well?
I think there is a matter to be said about the scales of risk here, that the climate crisis is such a greater risk to take that I feel like I'm a lot happier ladening my generation and coming generations with the burden of managing a well-regulated, well-maintained, and well-researched nuclear waste than I am with us having to deal with runaway greenhouse effects and massive climate disasters.
Why not focus on renewable sources, though? There may be short-term pain, as you mentioned, the German example, but if there's a possibility to focus funding on renewable sources for the future, why not focus on that?
Because it's not going to be enough. We've seen that in the countries that have tried, in Denmark, in Germany to some extent now, in California, in the US, that a grid with just wind and solar is not stable, and the transition to a sustainable future is absolutely dependent on a stable grid, because everything is going to need to be electrified. We're going to need electric transport and electrified industry and everything. And to do that, we need a lot of electricity, and we need a lot of stable electricity. And wind and solar will not cut it. And a vast majority of nations on this planet do not have the hydro capacity to make up for that. And that means nuclear.
I have to ask, are you connected to or funded by the nuclear industry at all?
I'm not. I'm doing this on my lonesome. My bank account is screaming.
You do have support from other young European activists in this specific Dear Greenpeace campaign. What do you think is keeping you and Greenpeace from coming to an understanding on this? Why do you think there's such a divide?
I think to a large extent that Greenpeace feels like it's very identity creating for them to be against nuclear power. Greenpeace is very much funded, and like they were born from the anti-nuclear movement.
In 1971, here in Canada, in Vancouver, in fact, for those who may not remember or may not know. So you're suggesting that they haven't been able to move forward or shift from that moment?
Yes, pretty much. They have not taken the time and energy to reconsider because it feels like such a fundamental part of who they are.
How far do you think you'll take this fight?
As far as need be, I do not see a future in which the world can have a just and equitable transition without nuclear power. For me, a transition without nuclear power is a transition that leaves a lot of humanity behind, and I'm not okay with that.
Leah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.